Welcome back, guys. This is going to be the second part of our tutorial series on AngularJS for the beginner web developers that I'm working on. So last time we looked at a couple of bindings. Today what we're going to do is we're going to do the drop-down list. Displaying drop-down lists in the web is very common and must-use feature. So that is what we're going to look at into today. So basically today we're going to write a code to grab the data JavaScript object and bind it into drop-down list. Okay, we'll have example of we will be binding all the countries of the world, and also we will be binding all the state of the United States. Okay, so what I have here is I created a new JavaScript file called Dropdown Binding, and corresponding to that Dropdown Binding I have HTML. They are empty, nothing is there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and start writing my view model. Okay, so I'm going to go into this file called Dropdown Binding here, and then let's start writing our code. This is going to be the structure. And then in here, let's go ahead and define a variable called viewModel. It's going to be a function. And let's provide a jQuery as a dependency to it. And we're gonna invoke this function right away, like that. And we can assign the function invocation reference into a variable called bm. Okay, this is how our structure looks like here. So inside here, I'm going to define object. All of these, I'm going to define a private object here, a function called keyValueMapper. And in the constructor of this one, I'm going to pass through two arguments, key and value. This is private JavaScript function that we'll be using only from here. So I'm going to define the key here, and let's define a value. Something like that. And then we can define some variables here. Let's define viewModel dropdown list bindings, or something like that. It's going to be a JavaScript object literal. Okay, into it we're going to write a code, and then from here we're going to return empty. The JavaScript object literal that contains viewModel. Let's say I'm just going to say bm, and the bm will be containing this particular object. This is going to be our view model that we'll be using, but that the KnockoutJs will be using. And then once our view model is defined around here, just like before, I'm going to grab the references to our library so that I will have an IntelliSense. I'm going to grab this and post it here. And then finally, I'm going to say knockout apply binding. Oops. Apply bindings and pass the view model here. This is our whole view model. Of course, right now our it's returning empty object. It doesn't have any literal or anything. So into this object, I'm going to define, because as I said you in the beginning, we will have a drop-down list containing the name of the countries, and then also we'll have name of the state. We will have two examples. We will show you how to do a binding using KnockoutJS. So here I'm going to I'm inside this JavaScript literal object. I'm going to define a property called states. It's going to be a state, and they are going to be observable array. Up to now, we were in our previous video tutorial, we look at into the scalar properties, like when it's string or integer or whatever. Here our object is a collection. That's why it's an observable array. So it's gonna participate in two-way data binding. So this is going to be a state here, and then we want to capture when the user selects something from the drop-down list. To capture that one, we define something called selected property, observable property called selected. And then other property we need to define is the countries. Let's define countries. This is also going to be the observable array. Name of countries, arrays of countries. And then we also want to keep track of the selected country. Let's define another observable property called selected country. It's going to be a scalar observable property. Okay. This is our basic view model here. We have a property like a state, and the selected state, and the countries, and then the selected country. Of course, right now we need the data that represent all the countries in the world and all the state of the United States of America. So very first thing, just for now, let's assume we got an array of states. I'm gonna say, let's say US states. That it's going to be array, and as you know, the array has this method called map. It's a really cool method. And then it takes a callback function. Okay. To the callback function, we're gonna say state. That closes that, and that closes that. And of course, this guy right here will be returning something. It has to return new. Remember, initially I created this key value mapper object. We're gonna utilize this one. We're gonna say key value mapper. We basically creating the new instance of key value mapper on each mapping, on each iteration of the number of state that we got. So we have this map function. So of course it takes two parameters. The key state will have value, that will be the key, and state will have a name, that will be our value, key and value. Okay, I'm going to define something like this, and then we can use the same idea right here. So let me copy this piece of code here to the countries. So instead of this US state, if I do this, we'll have the same, but I'm going to define this as a countries. So basically, I'm going to load all the countries into our observable collection here, countries. Maybe this should be different name because my properties here is also countries. So I'm going to say the world countries or something like that. And I'm going to this is going to be an array of object, and into it I'm going to call a map method, and then I have a callback function, and the same idea here. Okay. This is going to be our view model. Well, at this point you might be wondering, hey, where is this US state? Up to now I have a little file here called static data right here. This static data basically contains those information. Here is a JavaScript array object containing, here's an array with the value as 1 or name as, for example, let's say in this case it might be this 1, 2, 3 whatever. It could be the value that we store the country's name into a database. That's what we'll be doing eventually later. Right now I have this hard-coded data into this file called static data. That's where we'll be pasting our data from. So instead of using the just let's make sure I use the world countries. Make sure my spellings are okay. And also it has a property called value and a lowercase name. So I would rather say this as a country. And the country, oops, and this is going to be country here, and it has a property value and then the name. Okay, good. This is value. The key can be the value, and this can be the name. And also in the same static file, I have another variable to represent all the states of the United States, which is let me collapse. It's really long. So here is it's called American States, which has a value, state abbreviation, and the name of the state with the value and name. Unfortunately, my naming convention, I could have made this one lowercase. Let me go ahead and change it. So that way it would be the same for both of them. This is a really cool feature in Visual Studio. Like, you can select one character of all those 50 of them, and then I can just say lowercase n. Bam! It's a really awesome feature. Okay, I changed that one. So now this state also has a value and the lowercase name. Okay. Now here's your state. It stays value as a key and then the name. So now these two pieces, these are good to go. Now I think we are done with our JavaScript portion of the code. Okay. Now we're gonna look into how to write how to do a binding to the HTML into our So here is my HTML. Let's go ahead and drag all the files, JavaScript file that we need. Of course, I need I'm going to grab the jQuery minified version of the jQuery here, and then of course our main KnockoutJs, and then of course this the Dropdown Binding. And this guy, Dropdown Binding, has a dependency to a file called static data. That's where our world name information, country's name and the state name information are there. So that's why I'm going to load this file before this, just to satisfy that dependency. Okay, so let's start writing our HTML. Let's say examples of binding drop down list in KnockoutJs. Okay, let's create a div here. Let's give a span. Very simple HTML thing there. I'm gonna say please select state name or something like that, and then we'll have a next span tag here. And inside it, I'm going to create a drop-down list. The select drop-down list. And then, of course, we can use data bind. Remember, we are trying to bind those data that is there in the view model into our view. So we're going to use the data bind for the drop-down list. KnockoutJs by default provide these options. Binding. That's what we're going to use. So in our case, let me go ahead and save this one. Okay, here's my drop-down list. This is the option. Now I have to do a binding. As you can see right here, we have this VM, the view model. Instead of having this name, I'm gonna say binding. I'm going to give name like that. So I can go into my HTML and yeah. Like the good thing is it has a feature. It automatically identified, oh, okay, here is a, you would like to bind with a state. That is where our data are stored. And then the next thing we would like to have here, there is a something called option text, as you can see from right here. So what happens, what that one is basically you have a drop-down list. Drop-down list could be the value, intrinsic value that we would like to store. We would like to send it to the server side, and the text value that we would like to display to the user. That is what the option text binding is. So in our case, that would be, we're going to bind the option text with the property called key. That's what you might be wondering where that key is coming from, because if we look into our JavaScript here, we have here is the key and here is the value. The key private here is the value. That's why I'm binding with the key. Okay, that is the option text to display to the drop-down list, and as you have might guess by now, there is a corresponding property called option. Oh, it hasn't been closed here. I started from here. Okay, so here is the option value that we're going to bind with the value property of our object. And then there is another binding called value. That one we're gonna bind that one with our view models. Remember, this is our view model right here, object, and it has a scalar property called selected state. That is what we're going to bind it with. Okay, it's a selected state, and we would like to have one more thing, like, by default we would like to have something into a text box. Let's say option. There is one more binding we can use with the drop-down list called option caption. Maybe we can give a value like, please select your state, whatever your requirement is. And then this everything has to be closed here. Okay, this is our KnockoutJs binding. We are using the option from view model. We are getting the data to bind into our drop-down list, and option text. We are this should be value, and this should be the key. Okay. If everything is good, assuming there is no error or something, we should be able to bind our state. If we run this code, we should have our first binding. Let's go ahead and I'm going to set this drop-down list binding as the default page. It as a starter page, and I'm going to go ahead and run this one into a Chrome browser. Oh, it's not working. There is definitely something. It's not working properly. Okay, so on card reference, US state is not defined. Drop-down list binding. Where I'm referring to the US states. Static data here. That makes sense. There is no such variable called US state. That's why it is complaining about its American states. So when I do it, US state has no idea what you are referring to, which makes sense. Now this is an array. Let's see, that would fix that issue. Yay! Our first thing is working. As I told you before, right here is a this is how the binding really drop-down binding really works in KnockoutJs. So this is the text, and let's even to see everything. Let's look at the code. Let's do inspect here, and then if we expand our markup here, drop-down list, as you can see right here is the default value that is for the option caption, and then of course this is the key, the value, corresponding value. Here in our case, I'm just using state abbreviation to store into backend database, and maybe just the name to display to the user. Okay, that is that. The other thing, once that is done, I would like to let me close this one. So like when the user select this one, we want to have the corresponding value displayed. That's what we would like to send. So next thing, that's what we're going to do. Okay, next thing so when the user select this one, we would like to display somewhere here the corresponding abbreviation. Okay, let's work on into that one, and after that we will do a binding of the country. So to do that, let's go in here. Let's create some additional markup. I want some horizontal row here, and then let's define something. I'm going to use a data bind property, data bind, and then I'm going to use a binding called visible. We would like to have this section visible if in our case the drop down, what is our model name? If the selected state, if the state is selected, then we would like to have this deep section to be visible, otherwise not to be visible. Okay, so that's what we're going to do, and let's say have a span tag here and say selected state. And to this, we're going to do data bind. The text property of this span tag, we're going to bind with our see, the cool thing about the KnockoutJS is we can use any arbitrary JavaScript expression into the binding. So right here, I'm just using the tertiary operator, meaning if this one is selected, then I would like to display something like that, display the value, otherwise some other text may be invalid or whatever. Let's use a single quote, invalid state or something. Let's close our span tag here. Okay, let's see if this one works or not. Okay, so basically we are using the built-in binding called visible, and this is our kind of like a predicate. If this selected is, if it dropped any item is selected from drop down list, that would be visible. Let's give it a try. Right now, as you can see, by default, nothing, that whole section is not selected. But if I, for example, if I select the Alaska from here, from the drop down list, the corresponding value is displayed into that, is bind to our span tag. Here is for Connecticut. Okay, so this feature is working now. Now, as you have might guess now, we basically, to bind the country would be pretty easy. Basically, I'm gonna copy this entire section and just change the binding feature, and it should work. I'm gonna copy this portion here, and let's give it a, say, a country binding, country drop down bindings. So now we have to, of course, we have to change here. It's not selecting country this time. I'm gonna select there. Select the user is selecting the country name. Let's change this text right here. Instead of saying state, we would like to have the country bind, all the countries of the world. So here, the value and key, they are exactly the same. We don't have to make any changes here. And instead of selected state, I think I have selected country observable property. Yeah, as you can see, please select a country or whatever text you want. It doesn't really have to be that way. And then here it's a selected country. It does basically the same idea here. If it exists, we would like to display that one, otherwise invalid text. Selected country. This is mainly the code because we are selecting the value, corresponding value of the country, because that is what we need to send out to the server. Okay, let me go ahead and save this one. And if I refresh this page, right here is a country drop-down list. Here is the, let's say if I select the country of Angola, here is the corresponding code. We can verify that is correct by inspecting this one, and here's our drop-down list. And if we go into Azerbaijan, the corresponding value is 15, as you can see right here. Okay, with the KnockoutJs, like I told you before, so this tutorial is gonna be, like I said, gonna be very basic, because I would like first, we would like to know how we can use all our different kind of binding, text binding, which is very, very common, because most of the examples, they just go by a simple text binding and text boxes and stuff like that. But I realize I want to go through each different kind of widget in the web. In next video tutorial, we will go with our checkboxes and radio button lists and all this good thing. And eventually, it's going to be a full-fledged web application, guys. Thank you so much. That would be all for today's video tutorial. Have a good day. Bye.